Denmark's biggest heist, the Loomis cash processing facility robbery of 2008 in the quiet industrial district of Kastrup. It's just outside Copenhagen. Stood an unremarkable beige building that housed one of Denmark's most secure facilities, the Loomis Cash Processing Center. Behind its mundane exterior lay millions of Danish, kroner, euros, and other currencies being sorted, counted, and prepared for distribution to banks and ATMs across the country. The facility operated like clockwork, with armored vehicles arriving and departing throughout the day, carrying Denmark's financial lifeblood. The building itself was a modern fortress. Multiple layers of security surrounded the cache: reinforced concrete walls, bulletproof glass, motion sensors, surveillance cameras positioned at every angle, and a sophisticated alarm system connected directly to the police. Access required multiple authentication steps, keycards, biometric scanners, and personal identification numbers. The vault doors were time-locked, opening only during predetermined hours. Armed guards patrolled the premises, and the entire facility was monitored 24/7 from a central security station. Yet on February 16, 2008, this impregnable fortress would fall to one of the most audacious and meticulously planned heists in Danish criminal history. The mastermind and his crew. The man who would orchestrate Denmark's biggest heist was Viktor Kozlov, a 43-year-old former Russian military intelligence officer who had defected to the West in the late 1990s. His background remained largely classified, but intelligence sources later revealed he had specialized in counter-surveillance and infiltration operations during his military service. After his defection, Kozlov had lived quietly in Prague, ostensibly working as a security consultant, while actually building a network of professional criminals across Europe. Kozlov possessed an almost photographic memory for details and an obsessive approach to planning that bordered on the pathological. He had studied the Loomis facility for 8 months, making 73 separate reconnaissance visits disguised as various personas: a businessman seeking currency exchange services, a journalist researching cash handling procedures, a maintenance worker checking utility connections in the surrounding area. He compiled a 200-page dossier on the facility that included floor plans, security protocols, employee schedules, and even the personal habits of individual guards. The crew Kozlov assembled represented the elite of European criminal talent. His lieutenant was Marcus the Engineer Hoffmann, 38-year-old German former Bundeswehr explosive specialist who had been court-martialed for theft and subsequently disappeared into the criminal underworld. Hoffmann had earned his nickname through his ability to breach any electronic security system. He had reportedly penetrated systems for Siemens, Mercedes-Benz, and several major banks during corporate espionage operations. The electronics expert was Dmitry Volkov, 29-year-old Russian hacker who had learned his skills in Moscow's cybercrime underground before specializing in physical security systems. Volkov could disable alarm systems, manipulate surveillance cameras, and override electronic locks with tools he built himself from commercial electronics components. He had been involved in at least 8 major robberies across Eastern Europe, though he had never been caught or identified. Their inside man was Thomas Nielsen, but he was not their only source of intelligence. Kozlov had also recruited Anna Peterson, 31-year-old former Loomis employee who had been dismissed for minor theft 18 months earlier. Peterson harbored deep resentment against her former employer and had provided detailed information about internal procedures, including the precise timing of shift changes and the location of security cameras' blind spots. The muscle consisted of 2 men: Bjørn Larsen, 41-year-old former Danish Special Forces operator who had been dishonorably discharged for excessive violence during a peacekeeping mission, and Stefan Novak, a 34-year-old Polish former boxer who had connections to organized crime in Warsaw. Both men were chosen for their ability to intimidate without killing. Kozlov knew that violence would complicate their escape and intensify police investigation efforts. The getaway driver was perhaps the most crucial member of the team. Maria Santos, a 26-year-old Portuguese woman, had been born in Copenhagen to immigrant parents and knew the city streets better than most taxi drivers. She had been involved in car theft rings since her teens and could navigate Copenhagen's complex road system at high speed while avoiding police patrols. Santos had spent 3 months mapping every possible escape route from the facility, timing them under different traffic conditions, and identifying alternative paths for every conceivable scenario. For months, they conducted surveillance with the patience of naturalists studying their prey. Each team member had specific observation responsibilities. Kozlov documented guard rotations and administrative procedures. Hoffman analyzed the building's structural vulnerabilities and electronic systems. Volkov mapped the facility's digital infrastructure. Santos studied traffic patterns and police response times, while Larson and Novak evaluated the security personnel's training and likely reactions to a robbery attempt. They established a command post in a rented apartment building across the street from the facility, using sophisticated surveillance equipment to monitor radio communications, photograph personnel, and track the movement of armored vehicles. The apartment was rented under a false identity by Peterson, who maintained the cover of a freelance graphic designer working from home. The plan. The heist plan was a masterpiece of criminal engineering, accounting for every conceivable variable and contingency. The team had identified a critical vulnerability in the facility's morning routine, a brief window between 6:45 and 7:15 a.m., when the overnight security staff overlapped with the incoming day shift, creating a moment of confusion in the security protocols. Their entry strategy was breathtakingly simple, yet effective. Rather than attempting to breach the facility's formidable defenses, they would walk through the front door during this transition period. When multiple legitimate personnel were entering the building, the team had acquired authentic-looking uniforms and identification badges that would allow them to blend in with the arriving workers. The electronics expert had somehow obtained detailed schematics of the building's security system, possibly through an inside contact, or by infiltrating the security company's records. He'd identified exactly which circuits needed to be cut, and in what sequence to disable the alarm system without triggering backup protocols. The timing had to be perfect. They would have exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds before the security monitoring company would detect the system. Failure and alert police. February 16, 2008, the morning of the heist. At 5:30 a.m. on that cold February morning, Copenhagen lay under a blanket of pre-dawn darkness. The streets were nearly empty, save for the occasional early commuter and delivery truck. The heist team had spent the night in a rented warehouse on the outskirts of the city, going through their plan one final time, checking equipment and synchronizing watches. They traveled to the target in 3 separate vehicles, some remarkable cars that wouldn't attract attention, all with altered license plates that would delay identification. The getaway routes had been practiced dozens of times. With multiple contingency plans depending on police response times and traffic conditions, the entry, at precisely 6:47 a.m., 2 men in Loomis uniforms approached the facility's main entrance. Their badges appeared authentic, their demeanor confident but not suspicious. The morning guard, recognizing the uniforms and seeing legitimate workers arriving for the day shift, buzzed them through the first security door without question. Once inside the outer lobby, the electronics expert excused himself to use the restroom, a route that took him past the main electrical panel. In the 2 minutes he was gone, he accessed the panel using a key obtained through means that would never be fully explained, and began the delicate process of disabling the alarm system. His work was invisible to the security cameras, which he had already looped with pre-recorded footage showing an empty hallway, while his partner engaged the guard in casual conversation about the weather in the early shift, maintaining normalcy while precious seconds ticked by. At 6:52 a.m., the electronics expert returned, giving an almost imperceptible nod. The alarm system was neutralized into the heart of the fortress. With the alarms disabled, the second phase began with military precision. At 6:54 a.m., Larson and Novak entered through the side maintenance door that Peterson had identified during her employment. They wore authentic Loomis maintenance uniforms that Hoffman had acquired through a contact in the uniform supply industry. Each carried a regulation maintenance toolkit, but hidden within were zip ties, communication devices, and specialized equipment for the robbery. The facility's interior was exactly as their intelligence had described, a maze of corridors painted in institutional beige, with security cameras positioned at regular intervals. The team navigated using memorized routes that avoided camera coverage wherever possible. When cameras couldn't be avoided, Volkov activated pre-positioned signal jammers that he had planted during a previous reconnaissance mission, disguised as an electrical repair contractor. Their primary target was the main cash sorting room on the facility's second floor space, roughly 40 feet by 60 feet, where money was temporarily stored in large canvas bags before being secured in the time-locked vault. Intelligence from Nielsen and Peterson had revealed that between 7 o'clock and 7:30 a.m., this room would contain the largest concentration of unsecured cash from overnight armored car deliveries. The team's movement through the facility was choreographed to the second. Kozlov coordinated from outside using encrypted radio communications, monitoring police frequencies, and providing real-time updates on external conditions. Each team member wore nearly invisible earpieces that allowed constant communication without attracting attention. As they approached the sorting room, Hoffman disabled the electronic lock using a device he had constructed specifically for Loomis systems, a small computer that could rapidly cycle through potential access codes while monitoring the lock mechanism's electrical responses. The process took exactly 47 seconds, well within their planned time frame. The crucial moment. At 7:03 a.m., the team executed their assault on the sorting room with overwhelming force and psychological precision. The room contained 4 employees and 1 armed guard, exactly as their intelligence had predicted. The employees were Morten Larsen, Karen Anderson, Jens Peterson, and Lisa Svensson. The guard, Hans Nielsen, was a 54-year-old veteran with 18 years at Loomis. He carried a standard-issue Glock 17 pistol and had received advanced security training, but he had never faced a coordinated assault by professional criminals. Larsen and Novak entered simultaneously from opposite doors, preventing any chance of escape or defensive positioning. They wore full-face ski masks and carried what appeared to be assault rifles actually. Realistic replicas that looked intimidating but could uncause lethal harm, reducing potential charges if they were captured. Nobody move. This is a robbery. Comply, and no one gets hurt. Larsen shouted in Danish, his military training evident in his commanding voice. The psychological impact was immediate and overwhelming. The employees froze in terror. While the guard instinctively reached for his weapon, Novak had positioned himself specifically to neutralize the guard. He approached from the blind side while Hans Nielsen was distracted by Larsen's dramatic entrance. Using a technique learned in military training, Novak struck a pressure point on Nielsen's neck, causing temporary disorientation without permanent harm. The guard's weapon was removed and secured within seconds, face down on the floor. Hands where we can see them, Novak commanded, his Polish accent barely noticeable through years of Danish language practice. The employees complied immediately, their training having emphasized cooperation during robbery attempts to minimize the risk of violence. Within 90 seconds, the entire room was under complete control. Each employee was individually secured with plastic zip ties, hands behind their backs, ankles bound to prevent running. The restraints were tight enough to be effective, but not so tight as to cause injury or circulation problems. The systematic looting. What the robbers found exceeded even Kozlov's optimistic projections. The facility was holding an unusually large amount of cash due to a banking holiday the previous day, which had delayed several armored car pickups and caused cash from multiple sources to accumulate in the sorting room. The money was organized in a system that the team understood perfectly thanks to their inside intelligence. Canvas bags were arranged by currency type and denomination, with detailed tracking sheets indicating the contents of each container. Large bills were separated from small denominations, and foreign currencies were kept in a separate section near the main sorting tables. Hoffman immediately began documenting the available cash using a digital camera, photographing the tracking sheets and bag labels to ensure they took the most valuable contents. Their reconnaissance had revealed that the facility used a color coding system for different value ranges: red tags for bags containing over 500,000 kroner, blue tags for 100,000 to 500,000 kroner, and white tags for smaller amounts. The team had brought their own containers, military-style duffel bags with shoulder straps that could hold maximum cash while remaining manageable during the escape. Each bag was designed to carry approximately 8 to 10 million kroner in mixed denominations without becoming too heavy for rapid movement. Larsen focused on the red-tagged bags, which contained primarily 1,500 kroner notes. These high-denomination bills represented the greatest value for the smallest bulk, making them ideal for a robbery where carrying capacity was limited. He worked methodically, emptying the canvas bags into their duffel bags. while maintaining awareness of time constraints. Novak concentrated on foreign currency, particularly euros and British pounds, which would be easier to launder outside Denmark. The foreign currency section contained approximately 8 million kroner worth of various denominations, including several bags of 500 euro notes that were extremely valuable relative to their size. The counting and bagging process was conducted with remarkable organization. Each team member called out running totals as they worked. Red bag number 7, approximately 600,000, or euro section, 2.2 million so far. This allowed them to track their progress and ensure they reached their target amount without exceeding their carrying capacity. The haul, beyond all expectations. The systematic looting revealed a treasure trove that shocked even these experienced criminals. Instead of the estimated 30 to 40 million kroner they had planned for, they found themselves looking at nearly 62 million kroner in various currencies, plus substantial amounts of dollars, pounds, and other foreign money. The Danish kroner was dominated by high-denomination notes, hundreds of 1,000 kroner bills, thousands of 500 kroner notes, and a surprising amount of 200 kroner bills that were relatively rare in normal circulation. The foreign currency section was even more valuable: bags of 500 euro notes, bundles of 200 euro bills, and British pounds in large denominations. The team's discipline proved crucial at this moment of overwhelming temptation. Despite having access to more money than any of them had ever seen, they stuck rigidly to their plan. They had calculated that they could safely carry approximately 45 to 50 million kroner. During their escape without compromising their mobility or increasing their risk of capture, Kozlov's voice came through their earpieces. 12 minutes elapsed. Begin final selection. This was the signal to prioritize only the most valuable bags and prepare for departure. The team had rehearsed this moment extensively. The temptation to take everything could easily compromise the entire operation. Hoffman made the final selections based on value-to-weight ratios he had calculated during their planning phase. They prioritized 1,000 kroner notes, 500 euro bills, and foreign currency over bulkier, smaller denominations. Each duffel bag was filled to a predetermined weight limit that would allow rapid movement during the escape. The final count was staggering. Approximately 47 million Danish kroner, 8 million euros, 2 million British pounds, and smaller amounts of other currencies. The total value exceeded 62 million kroner, the largest cash theft in Danish history by a massive margin. Managing the witnesses. Throughout the robbery, the team maintained strict psychological control over their captives. Larsen, with his military background, understood that terrified witnesses could become unpredictable and dangerous. He spoke to them regularly in calm, authoritative tones. "You're doing great. Stay calm, and this will be over soon. No one wants to hurt you." Employees were kept face down on the floor, but were allowed to move slightly to maintain circulation. Novak periodically checked their restraints to ensure they weren't cutting off blood flow while remaining secure. This professional approach reduced panic and prevented desperate attempts to escape or resist. Guard Hans Nielsen received special attention due to his training and potential for resistance. Larsen engaged him in brief conversations, assessing his mental state and ensuring he understood that cooperation was his best option for survival. "You're trained for this situation," Larsen told him. "You know the protocol is to comply. Your company's insurance will cover the loss." The psychological management extended to providing information that reduced anxiety. "We'll be leaving in a few minutes," Novak announced at one point. "Everyone stays calm. Everyone goes home safely tonight." This kind of communication, learned from hostage negotiation techniques, helped maintain control without resorting to violence. Escape. Vanishing into the dawn. At 7:18 a.m., exactly 15 minutes after entering the sorting room, the team began their withdrawal with the same military precision they had used throughout the operation. Each member carried 2 duffel bags, containing approximately 12 to 15 million kroner, distributed to maintain balance and mobility. Before leaving, they secured the employees and the guard with additional restraints designed to delay their ability to raise an alarm. Plastic zip ties were reinforced with duct tape, and their communications devices were disabled or removed. However, the restraints were applied in a way that would allow the captives to eventually free themselves. The team wanted time to escape, not to cause unnecessary suffering. Count to 500 before you try to get free, Larson instructed the employees. That gives us time to clear the building and ensures your safety. This was both a practical delay tactic and a psychological technique to maintain control even after the robbers had left. The withdrawal through the facility was executed in reverse order of their entry. Volkov reactivated certain security systems as they moved, creating the impression that any malfunctions had been temporary technical issues rather than deliberate sabotage. His electronic expertise allowed him to restore normal operations to most systems, while leaving no trace of their manipulation. Hoffman secured the doors they had used, ensuring that casual inspection wouldn't reveal their entry methods. The maintenance door was relocked using the original mechanism. The tools they had used were wiped clean of fingerprints and left in locations where they would appear to be legitimate maintenance equipment. Outside the building, Santos had positioned the primary getaway vehicle, modified Mercedes Sprinter van, in the facility, its delivery area where it would blend in with other commercial vehicles. The van had been stolen 3 days earlier in Hamburg and fitted with false Danish license plates that would pass casual inspection but could unwithstand detailed investigation. The van's interior had been specially prepared with hidden compartments constructed by Hoffman. The main cargo area appeared to contain legitimate electrical equipment, but false floors and wall panels concealed spaces designed to hold the stolen money. These compartments were lined with materials that would block radio frequency scanners and had been tested to ensure they wouldn't be detected by stomped police search methods. The Great Vanishing, disappearing with 62 million. The team's exit from the facility was timed to coincide with the normal morning delivery schedule. Santos drove the getaway van exactly like a legitimate delivery vehicle, maintaining normal speeds and obeying all traffic laws. The other team members had changed clothes and removed their disguises, appearing to be ordinary workers leaving a night shift. The van took a predetermined route through Copenhagen's industrial districts, avoiding main roads and areas with high concentrations of traffic cameras. Santos had spent weeks learning the optimal path, timing it under different traffic conditions, and identifying alternative routes for various contingencies. At 7:31 a.m., as the van disappeared into morning traffic, senior employee Morten Larsen managed to free himself from his restraints in the sorting room. His first action was to trigger the facility's emergency alarm, setting in motion the largest criminal investigation in Danish history. But by then, Kozlov's team and their 62 million kroner had vanished into the underground networks of European organized crime, beginning a money laundering operation so sophisticated that most of the stolen cash would never be recovered. The perfect crime had been executed with military precision, leaving behind only bewildered witnesses and a crime scene that would puzzle investigators for years to come. When the fortress fell. At 7:31 a.m., 13 minutes after the robbers had left the building, senior employee Morten Larsen managed to free himself from his restraints and triggered the facility's emergency alarm. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Copenhagen police, responding to what they initially thought might be a false alarm, instead found themselves facing the crime scene of the largest cash robbery in Danish history. The first officers to arrive were stunned by what they discovered. The professionalism of the operation was immediately apparent. No violence, no unnecessary destruction, no fingerprints or DNA evidence left behind. The robbers had taken only cash, leaving behind valuable equipment and personal items that might have been easier to grab but harder to dispose of. Detective Inspector Klaus Andersen, who would lead the investigation, arrived at 8:15 a.m. to find a crime scene that told the story of a near-perfect heist. In 30 years of police work, he would later tell reporters, "I had never seen anything so professionally executed. These weren't opportunistic criminals. This was a military-style operation." Investigation begins. Chasing ghosts. The initial investigation faced immediate challenges. The robbers had left virtually no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, no surveillance footage that showed their faces clearly. The uniforms they had worn were generic enough to be purchased at any number of stores, and the few traces of physical evidence led nowhere specific. Detective Andersen assembled a task force of 20 officers, including specialists in financial crimes, surveillance analysis, and criminal psychology. They began with the basics, analyzing traffic camera footage from the surrounding area, interviewing every employee who had been on duty during the previous week, and conducting background checks on anyone with access to the facility. The traffic camera analysis proved particularly frustrating.
Ow.
The robbers had clearly studied the camera locations carefully, taking routes that minimized their exposure while never appearing suspicious. But when they did appear on camera, they were wearing disguises and driving vehicles with false plates that led to dead ends. The cash simply vanished into Denmark's underground economy without creating any traceable footprints. Financial intelligence units monitored banks across Denmark and internationally, looking for unusual deposits or currency exchanges that might indicate laundering activity. They coordinated with Europol and Interpol, since the stolen money included foreign currencies that might surface in other countries. Months passed without a significant lead. The investigation expanded to include known criminal networks specializing in cash robberies. But none of the usual suspects had any connection to the Loomis heist. This wasn't the work of Denmark's traditional criminal organizations, it was something entirely new. As the investigation progressed, attention increasingly focused on the possibility of inside assistance. And daily routines suggested access to information that would be difficult to obtain through external surveillance alone. Every current and former Loomis employee underwent intensive background investigation. Detective Anderson's team conducted polygraph tests, analyzed financial records, and monitored communications. They discovered that several employees had gambling debts or other financial pressures that might motivate criminal behavior. But none could be definitively linked to the robbery. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Marie Svensson, a former Loomis employee who had left the company 6 months before the robbery, contacted police after seeing news coverage of the investigation. She reported that a colleague, Thomas Nielsen, had asked unusually detailed questions about security procedures during her final weeks at the company. His financial records revealed gambling debts totaling over 200,000 kroner, and cell phone records showed contact with several individuals whose identities couldn't be easily verified. The surveillance web, based on the Nielsen lead, the investigation took on new urgency. A surveillance operation was established, monitoring Nielsen's activities, communications, and associates. What they discovered was a man living under enormous financial pressure. With creditors threatening violence and his family's security at risk, the surveillance team, led by Detective Sergeant Anna Christensen, documented Nielsen's routine carefully. He lived modestly, showed no signs of sudden wealth, and maintained normal work patterns. But there were anomalies: regular meetings with individuals who had no apparent connection to his legitimate life, and cell phone conversations conducted in locations where surveillance was difficult. The investigation team also discovered that Nielsen had researched topics related to money laundering and international currency exchange in the months leading up to the robbery. His computer search history revealed visits to websites discussing various criminal techniques. Though he had been careful to use public computers and internet cafes for the most sensitive research, as investigators dug deeper into Nielsen's background, they uncovered connections that extended far beyond Denmark's borders. Phone records revealed communications with individuals in Germany, the Netherlands, and the Czech Republic, countries known for sophisticated money laundering operations. Detective Anderson coordinated with international law enforcement agencies to trace these connections. What emerged was a picture of a loose network of professional criminals specializing in large-scale cash robberies across Northern Europe. The Loomis heist appeared to be part of a larger pattern of similar crimes, each executed with the same level of planning and professionalism. The German authorities provided particularly valuable intelligence, including a similar heist at a currency exchange facility in Hamburg 6 months earlier. The case's turning point came from an unexpected technological development. In late 2009, nearly 2 years after the robbery, Danish authorities gained access to new cell phone tracking technology that could retroactively analyze communication patterns from historical data. This technology revealed a previously undetected pattern of communications between Nielsen and several unknown individuals in the weeks leading up to the robbery. More importantly, it showed that these same communication patterns had been active during other major robberies across Europe, suggesting a coordinated criminal network. Detective Christensen's analysis of this data revealed that the communications followed a specific protocol-coded language, predetermined meeting times, and a hierarchical structure that suggested military or intelligence training among the participants. The level of operational security was far above what Danish authorities had previously encountered in criminal investigations. The arrest? On March 15, 2010, more than 2 years after the robbery, Copenhagen police executed coordinated arrests across the city, while simultaneous raids targeted 3 other addresses connected to the investigation. The evidence against Nielsen was substantial, but circumstantial. Financial records showed payments that coincided with his cooperation in planning the robbery, and communication analysis placed him in contact with known international criminals. However, the investigation team knew that proving his guilt in court would require more direct evidence. The other arrests yielded mixed results. 2 individuals were released after questioning when their connections to the case proved tenuous. The third arrest was more significant. Erik Johansen, a former military explosives expert with connections to organized crime networks in Germany and the Netherlands. The interrogation. Nielsen's interrogation revealed a man consumed by guilt and fear. Detective Anderson, experienced in handling complex criminal psychology, approached the questioning with patience and psychological insight. Rather than aggressive confrontation, he offered Nielsen an opportunity to reduce his legal jeopardy by cooperating with the investigation. Over several days of questioning, Nielsen gradually revealed his role in the heist. His gambling debts had made him vulnerable to recruitment by the criminal network, which had been studying potential targets across Northern Europe. The Loomis facility had been selected because of its large cash volumes and Nielsen's access to critical security information. The alternative, they made clear, would be violence against his wife and children. Nielsen's cooperation opened up the entire criminal network. He provided details about the other participants, their methods, and their international connections. This intelligence led to coordinated arrests across 4 countries, dismantling what authorities described as one of Europe's most sophisticated cash robbery networks. The investigation revealed that the network had been responsible for at least 12 major heists across Northern Europe, stealing an estimated total of over 50 million euros. The Loomis robbery had been their most ambitious operation, both in terms of the amount stolen and the complexity of the planning required. International cooperation proved essential to the investigation's success. German authorities provided surveillance footage that had captured several network members during planning meetings. Dutch police contributed financial intelligence that traced money laundering operations. Czech authorities arrested 2 individuals who had provided false documentation and other logistical support. The trial of Thomas Nielsen and Erik Johansen, began in Copenhagen District Court. On September 12, 2011, the prosecution, led by State Attorney Lars Petersen, presented a meticulously documented case that traced the robbery from its initial planning through execution and aftermath. Nielsen's testimony provided crucial details about the heist's planning and execution. He described how the network had spent months studying the facility, analyzing security procedures, and preparing contingency plans for various scenarios. His cooperation with authorities had been essential to understanding the scope and sophistication of the operation. Johansen maintained his innocence throughout the trial, but evidence against him was overwhelming. Cell phone records placed him in Copenhagen during the planning phase. Financial records showed payments that corresponded to his alleged role in the network, and international witnesses testified about his involvement in similar operations elsewhere. The trial lasted 6 weeks and attracted intense media attention throughout Denmark. The public was fascinated by the details of the heist's planning and execution, while also being disturbed by the extent of international criminal cooperation it had revealed. The sentences, consequences of crime. On November 18, 2011, Thomas Nielsen was sentenced to 8 years in prison for his role in planning and facilitating the robbery. The court acknowledged his cooperation with authorities but emphasized that his betrayal of trust as a security professional had made the enormous theft possible. Erik Johansen received a 12-year sentence, reflecting his role as one of the primary organizers of the criminal network. The court noted his lack of remorse and continued, a refusal to provide information that might help recover the stolen money or identify other network members. Several other individuals connected to the network received sentences ranging from 4 to 10 years in courts across Europe. The coordinated prosecutions sent a clear message about international cooperation in combating sophisticated criminal organizations. Despite the successful prosecutions, the vast majority of the stolen money was never recovered. Investigators estimated that less than 5% of the 62 million kroner had been traced and seized. The remainder had been successfully laundered through the network's sophisticated financial operations and disappeared into the global underground economy. The unrecovered money became a source of ongoing frustration for authorities and the public. Detective Anderson, reflecting on the case years later, noted that the network's financial sophistication had been even more impressive than their operational planning. They understood that stealing the money was only half the challenge, he observed. The real skill was in making it disappear forever. Some of the money was believed to have been invested in legitimate businesses across Europe, effectively cleaning its origins while providing ongoing income for network members. Other portions may have been converted to untraceable assets like precious metals or artwork, stored in secure locations for future use. Legacy of the heist. The Loomis robbery fundamentally changed security practices throughout Denmark's financial sector. Cash processing facilities implemented new protocols requiring multiple independent verifications for all personnel access. Background investigations became more thorough and ongoing, rather than one-time events at hiring. The case also highlighted the importance of international cooperation in combating sophisticated criminal networks. New agreements between European law enforcement agencies improved information sharing and coordinated response capabilities for similar crimes. For the Danish public, the heist represented both fascination and concern. The criminal's sophistication and professionalism captured public imagination, but the ease with which they had penetrated supposedly secure facilities raised troubling questions about other vulnerabilities in the financial system. The aftermath: lives changed forever. Thomas Nielsen served 6 years of his 8-year sentence before being released on parole in 2017. His cooperation with authorities had earned him protection in a witness security program, and he relocated to another European country with his family. His gambling addiction, the root cause of his criminal involvement, required ongoing treatment and supervision. The Loomis employees who had been present during the robbery suffered lasting psychological effects. Several required extensive counseling and were unable to return to work in security-related positions. The company provided support services, but the trauma of the experience had permanent impacts on their lives. Eric Johansson completed his full sentence and was deported to Germany, where he faced additional charges related to other network operations. Intelligence agencies continued monitoring his activities, believing him to remain connected to international criminal organizations. The perfect crime's imperfection. The Loomis heist demonstrated that even the most carefully planned crimes ultimately depend on human elements that introduce unpredictable variables. The network's operational excellence was undermined by Nielsen's psychological vulnerability and the inevitable pressures of maintaining complex criminal relationships over time. Law enforcement learned valuable lessons about investigating sophisticated international criminal operations. Traditional methods focusing on physical evidence and local criminal networks proved inadequate against opponents with military-level planning capabilities and international resources. The case also highlighted the importance of addressing underlying social problems that make individuals vulnerable to criminal recruitment. Nielsen's gambling addiction and financial desperation had created the opportunity for the network to exploit his access to critical security information. Questions that remained. Despite the successful prosecutions, significant aspects of the case remain unsolved. The identity of the network's ultimate leadership was never determined, and investigators believe that the individuals arrested represented only the operational level of a larger criminal organization. The source of the network's detailed intelligence about various target facilities across Europe remains unclear. The level of information they possessed suggested access to security industry databases or the compromise of multiple inside sources beyond those identified during the investigation. Most frustratingly, the location of the stolen money continues to elude authorities. Periodic investigations based on new intelligence or tips from informants have yielded no significant recoveries, suggesting that the network's money laundering capabilities were even more sophisticated than their operational planning. The Loomis cash processing facility robbery stands as a watershed moment in Danish criminal history, not just for the amount stolen, but for the level of sophistication it revealed in international criminal organizations. The case demonstrated that Denmark, despite its reputation for safety and social stability, was not immune to the activities of professional criminal networks operating across national boundaries. The investigation's success in dismantling the network and securing convictions showed the effectiveness of international law enforcement cooperation when properly coordinated. However, the failure to recover the stolen money served as a reminder that prevention remains more effective than prosecution in protecting society's assets. For the Danish public, the case became a landmark event that changed perceptions about both criminal capability and security vulnerability. The image of criminals walking through the front door of a supposedly secure facility challenged assumptions about the effectiveness of traditional security measures. The heist's legacy continues to influence security practices, law enforcement procedures, and public policy discussions about financial crime prevention. While the immediate perpetrators face justice, the broader criminal network they represented remains active, continuing to evolve and adapt to new security measures and investigation techniques. In the end, Denmark's biggest heist was both a crime story and a cautionary tale demonstrating that, in an interconnected world, no nation's borders can fully protect it from sophisticated international criminal enterprises. The 62 million kroner that vanished on that February morning in 2008 represented more than money. It was a symbol of the changing nature of crime in the 21st century. Where traditional boundaries between local and international, physical and financial, legal and illegal, have become increasingly blurred, the fortress fell not to brute force, but to human weakness and professional planning. In doing so, it revealed truths about both crime and security that continue to resonate more than a decade later, ensuring that the Loomis heist will be remembered, not just as Denmark's biggest robbery, but as the crime that changed how an entire nation understood the threats it faced in an interconnected world. Subscribe to this channel for this and more captivating stories.